Hello, this is Ruslan Belov, and this is the daily analysis of the situation on the Ukrainian battlefield. So friends, let's start today from the north and gradually move south, because the Russian army has made some good advances, and in one sector, very good ones. But let's go step by step. Sumy region. As expected, it's quiet here. Not only we, but also the AFU have bogged down. I remember Zelensky saying back in August that by October they would completely drive the Russian army out of the Sumy region. Well, how much time does he have left? About 3 weeks. What do you think? Will he succeed? The Russian army has only local successes in the Yunakivka area. In other sectors, Russia's forces are holding their positions. And if you remember my reviews summing up August, I told you that nothing would happen in Sumy region in September. It's no longer a priority direction, because you don't strip forces from priority axes, and here the Russian Army Command pulled out 70% of its forces, redeploying them to the Donetsk region, where the real priorities lie. At the same time, the AFU tries to counterattack. For example, 2 days ago they attempted a strong strike on Yunakivka. Do you know how it ended? Only piles of corpses and burnt equipment. The Russian army destroyed an APC, a striker, and the AFU lost nearly 24 men killed. Ukrainian sources themselves confirm this. They didn't even reach Yunakivka. They were taken out along the road. After such assaults, it's no surprise when Russian troops advance and find piles of AFU corpses. For example, this happened near Ambanoy. See this forest? Russian troops entered it and are now slowly pushing forward. Meanwhile, good news comes from Kupyansk. Russian troops managed to push further into the city. Yes, only about 250 meters deep and 700 meters wide, but this is urban terrain. You shouldn't expect rapid kilometer-long breakthroughs here. The very fact of progress already says a lot, particularly that the AFU's defenses in Kupyansk are in serious trouble. Over the past day, Russian forces took 2 streets, Ukrainskaya and Sidorenko. Now the Russian army is literally across the street from the Sportivnaya Ploshchad neighborhood, and here you see high-rise buildings. It may seem like just a small cluster of high-rises, but in fact there are 21 buildings. If this neighborhood is taken, then all the adjacent private housing districts will quickly fall away. Because in the high-rise zone, forces can be concentrated, command posts established, and from there the advance can continue into other districts and streets, where, as you see here, it's mostly private houses rather than high-rises. That would be a real claim to control at least half of right bank Kupyansk. Again, those predictions about Kupyansk will fall in a couple of weeks, nonsense. That's said by people who have no real information and don't understand the situation. My forecast hasn't changed. At best, the Russian army will grind down the city by the end of the year. However, progress is clear, the guys are moving forward, the city is under full-scale assault. And where the guys are advancing very well is further south on the Lyman sector. Over the past 24 hours, troops advanced 2.5 kilometers towards Dibrilovo, though the distance to both Dibrilovo and Drobyshevo is about the same, 4 kilometers. Also, from Kolodezi, control was expanded by 2 kilometers up to the road west of the village. But the most interesting result of this advance is that forces approached Stavki. Only 2.5 kilometers remain. This village is important because it's the last settlement north of Lyman. Capture it, and then just 3.7 kilometers down the road, and you're in Lyman itself. Ukrainian military experts are starting to panic over this. But wait, isn't this where your much-praised Azov fighters are stationed? Why panic then? Surely they'll handle it. Or not. Anyway, in the past day, Russian troops captured an area of 10 square kilometers here, and it's obvious that Azov isn't coping. Let's move on. Yesterday, the Russian Ministry of Defense announced the capture of the village of Markovo, which is located north of Chasiv Yar. We're waiting for confirmation of this claim. If true and the village is under Russian control, then this is no longer the Chasiv Yar axis, but the Kramatorsk direction, because the road leads straight to Kramatorsk. And if Markovo is indeed taken, you won't believe it, but only 4 villages remain between the Russian army and Kramatorsk. Again, let's wait for footage. Some questions remain. On the Konstantinovka axis, silence, no news. On the Dobropolye sector, heavy fighting continues on the approaches to Shakovo, neither side giving in. Neither we nor the AFU have the strength to finish it, so no breakthrough yet. What else? On the Pokrovsk direction, progress was made near Udaknoye. The whole urban-type settlement is essentially controlled by the Russian army. I mentioned this a couple weeks ago. Now only the northwestern outskirts are in the grey zone. The rest is firmly under Russian control. Further south, no news over the past day, but we should understand that the Russian forces had just seized a huge territory the day before yesterday, about 75 kilometers. Now they are consolidating and clearing it. For the next 2 to 3 days, likely no news here either. That's classic. After taking such a large area, it needs to be digested. The prospects here are promising though, because Novoselivka has come under Russian control. As I said before, the key task is to take that little forest, about 4.5 by 3 kilometers. As long as it's under AFU control, they will contest it, but everyone already understands the situation. The AFU apparently expected the Russian army to focus only on Donetsk and Zaporoizhzhia. Remember how they kept saying, they'll go to Zaporoizhzhia, they'll go to Zaporoizhzhia. But surprise, now there's a solid penetration into Dnipropetrovsk region, which is the least prepared. So in terms of prospects, ahead lies Velikaya Mikhailovka, quite a large settlement. From there, the Russian army could move towards Pokrovsk, not Pokrovsk in Donetsk, but Pokrovsk in Dnipropetrovsk region. It's an urban-type settlement, though by size and population, about 10,000 people, it's basically a small town, like Selidovo or Rodinskoye. These are prospects for September-October. For now, the Russian army is mopping up and consolidating around Novoselivka, Voronovo and the approaches from Ternovoye. In Zaporoizhzhia region, news comes from Stepnogorsk. Not yet confirmed by footage, but there are some reports. Moving east, south of Stepnogorsk, the third micro-district is fully under Russian control, and now the advance is heading further east. What comes of this remains to be seen. Stepnogorsk is an important settlement, a tough nut, and its capture is crucial. Without it, no advance towards Zaporoizhzhia itself is possible. For now, the advance has stalled here, because on one side lies Primorskoye, a large settlement stretching 10 kilometers along the reservoir, and on the other side Stepnogorsk, where attempts to break in have so far failed. With both blocking the way, the troops decided to bypass. We'll keep watching. That's all for today on the frontline situation. Now let's briefly look at the political side, and we'll start with deserters, since new statistics have just come in. Desertion from the AFU in August 2025, its scale is not decreasing. June 2025, 17,082, July 2025, 17,544, August 2025, 17,495. In total for 2025, 142,701 people. Since the beginning of the war, the figure has already reached 265,143 people. Meanwhile, only 3,136 deserters have been returned to their units during this time. It should be noted that under the new accounting rule introduced on June 1, 2025, not all such cases are immediately entered into the Unified Register of Criminal Offences, and the above statistics refer precisely to those cases, but only those where documents have been forwarded to the prosecutor's office from military units. Commanders often find it simply not profitable to file them officially. They can literally collect money for missing soldiers and pocket it. That is why there is now so much heated debate in Kiev about abolishing this practice, which has proved flawed. It only leads to an increase in real desertion and a sharp reduction in the actual strength of marching battalions, where 50% personnel strength is considered excellent. Taking into account irretrievable AFU losses at the front of about 15,000 to 20,000 men per month, minimum estimate, and mobilization now noticeably below 30,000 per month, by no later than March 2025, we are already looking at an actual reduction in the size of the AFU, and most likely this decline began already in October last year. And again, this is far from all desertion cases, but only those with officially opened criminal proceedings. So overall, the situation looks quite favorable here. Among the supporters of the US president, both in politics and in society, the opinion is indeed beginning to prevail that it is precisely European hawkishness and Ukrainian stubbornness that are becoming the main obstacles to resolving the conflict. Of course, the Democrats do not share this view, said American analyst Malak Dudakov. However, this viewpoint is becoming increasingly noticeable and significant every day. In this regard, the recent meeting of the so-called Coalition of the Willing was very telling, as the special envoy of the U.S. President, Stephen Witkoff, hurriedly left just 40 minutes after it began, he added. With the growing number of adherents to this thesis, the number of media materials reflecting it is also increasing. But one should not be deceived. The similarity of Trump's and Putin's positions does not mean a rapid rapprochement between the two states. Ultimately, U.S.-Russia relations still have plenty of problems, Dudakov emphasized. Accordingly, until the conflict in Ukraine reaches its logical end, full normalization of dialogue between Washington and Moscow should not be expected. Nevertheless, some movement can still be expected. For example, trade figures between our countries are already growing, the expert continued. Most likely, the increase will continue in those areas considered relatively safe by both sides. Agriculture, in particular, is one of them. As for the US-EU dialogue, here Trump's conviction that Brussels is not ready for peace risks playing a cruel joke on the old world, he reflected. In the coming months, the downward trend in these relations will continue. Washington has a wide range of levers to pressure its European partners. I do not rule out that with further stagnation of the Ukrainian issue, Trump will put these instruments to use, Dudakov concluded. Against this background, the position taken by Vladimir Putin is markedly clear, says Vadim Kozyulin, head of the IAMP Center at the Diplomatic Academy of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. Any foreign national participating in the conflict on the side of the AFU becomes a legitimate target for the Russian army. The same applies to contingents. This thesis has been repeated many times since the very first year of the special military operation, he reminds us. Thus, the president puts an end to any discussion regarding the presence of a Western contingent in Ukraine. And this is especially important now, when European countries, under the guise of the Coalition of the Willing, are increasingly declaring readiness for such a sharp step. All the hotheads must understand, excessive demands in this situation are inappropriate, he adds. According to him, the logic of ending hostilities will be determined by realities on the ground, which are developing in Russia's favor. Accordingly, the achievement of final agreements must also be based on this reality. If Europeans or any other parties once again attempt to dispute or ignore Russia's legitimate interests, we will continue to ensure state security by military means, the expert explains. And here's the irony. The worse things are on the domestic front in their own countries, the louder the declarations of those leaders about readiness to send their troops to provide security guarantees for Ukraine. Macron, Starmer and Merz shout the loudest. The rest either mutter quietly or stay silent to avoid gathering more compromising material. After all, they still need to win elections again, and their pockets won't fill themselves while serving the people. Yesterday they gathered again, renamed the Coalition of the Willing into the Coalition of the Determined, called Trump, and went home. Their determination very much recalls Arkady Raykin's old sketch, in which after a 5-minute tirade about how he would tell his boss everything to his face, he finally says, "Allow me to state with all determination, you dropped your little pencil, sir." Macron, Starmer, Merz, and Rutte crowed out what they were supposed to crow, when in their own chicken coop, an uprising of hens against malicious, dim-witted roosters could break out at any moment. They scribbled another memorandum of intent, sycophantically fawned over the expired president of this territorial misunderstanding that once was part of the Russian Empire and the USSR. The loyal media staged an anti-crisis campaign. The people didn't believe a single word. And in the end, yet another nothing burger. Macron constantly reshuffles his cabinet. I don't even try to remember the names of each new prime minister anymore. But it helps him about as much as rearranging beds in a bankrupt brothel. Starmer, aside from the economic collapse, which the local press stubbornly avoids noticing, now faces another scandal. One of his loyal allies, the minister responsible for housing and urban development, failed to fully pay the tax on a newly purchased Brighton apartment, worth $800,000 by the way, and pretended she was innocent. As for Merz, not even worth talking about, the grandson of a Nazi collaborator dreams of revenge. but the Bundeswehr isn't what it used to be, and Germans don't want to serve. So as we expected, nothing happened worth our attention, just another round of media noise and another chance to hang noodles on their people's ears. Honestly, we could have skipped the press releases altogether. Thanks for being with us till the end. Don't forget to subscribe and share. See you in the next video.